Hi, everyone, and thanks for joining our Game Habitat event. Today, we have our friends from Psykologpartners in Malmo. They're going to give a presentation about how to handle crisis and lead from distance. But for those who don't know me, I'm Eliana, and I'm the COO at Game Habitat, the game development hub in southern Sweden. Um, Together with our local game studios and the community, we organize various events and projects, initiatives, and we are working to create the best environments for game developers here in our region. So if you want to know more about us or if you want to follow some of our events, please join and check our channels. We're posting the events now on YouTube. So you can just go at our YouTube channel and check some previous talks. We also have a Discord server that you can check and join to meet some other developers and see news from the region, see what's happening, and as well to keep up to date to our next events. And also our website, gamehabitat.se, and then you can check out some of other projects that we are working at the moment. So without further ado, I'll bring you Johan and Anna from Psykologpartners to join us and give us a presentation. Hi, Johan. Hi, Anna. How
Hi,
are you?
Hi,
I'm fine.
good.
Yeah.
And thank you very much for inviting us in. Okay, so my name is Anna Rattigan, and I'm a psychologist with Psykologpartners. And we're in the Malmö office today, and I'm here with my colleague Johan. And Psykologpartners is a consultancy firm with about 120 consultants all over Sweden. And as well as working with clinical psychology, we as psychologists, we actually work with organizational psychology, which means that we handle managers, we do a lot of training courses, we work with group development. So a little bit less of the clinical side and more of organizational issues and management issues. So Johan, who are you?
Yes, I've been a licensed psychologist since 2007. I started up a few years of clinical practice treating patients before I switched to this track, training teams, leaders, and giving advice to organizations. I also have a background as a manager myself in different positions, and before I started this career, I served in the Swedish Army as a soldier in the also in the Balkans in the peacekeeping forces. So that's a little bit of my background.
Mhm.
And you, Anna, what took you here?
Well, I've been with Psykologpartners for a year and a half, and before that, I had a career as a psychologist within the Swedish armed forces. So I was working with occupational issues, like occupational health, which included a lot of management training and also crisis from a variety of situations that soldiers and officers can get into. And I've also been down in Africa during a shorter UN mission as a psychologist. So I have a bit of a mixed background, and previous to that, I was working in occupational healthcare in Sweden. So I've always had an eye for, occupational healthcare, organizational psychology, and work psychology. That's what I like about being a psychologist. That's my area of expertise.
Great. And how to handle crisis and lead from a distance? Where are we going from here?
Well, we'll see where we end up going with you. We're going to talk about crisis, and we're going to start from an individual perspective, and then we're going to widen the perspective into an organizational setting and groups, and how to handle the kind of crisis we're in at the moment, and give you some tips on management issues that could arise during this kind of situation, but also how to handle reactions and what needs to be done during this kind of time and how you can prepare yourself. So is this not working for us, Johan? Let's see now. Now, here we go. So these are the topics we want to cover today. So crisis and how we react to them, um, our ability to handle crisis and how to build resilience, what it's like to work from home, and surveys that's been done lately during the corona crisis, what's been working and what's been not working in this new situation, and how to manage a remote team, and also how to keep creativity and innovation during this kind of time. And of course, we're curious to see what kind of experiences you might have as well. So feel free to ask and share in the Q&A session.
So, a lot of
Let's get-
topics. We start off in this crisis thing. What's that?
Yeah, we're just to kind of get you to understand what we mean when we talk about crisis. A crisis is a situation that's defined as a stressful time in someone's life. It could be on an individual level, or it could also be on a broader level in society. But it's an experience of a breakdown or a disruption of your normal life and your normal daily functioning. So there has to be that kind of element in it to call the situation a crisis. And Johan, we all know that a crisis is a normal reaction to an abnormal event. And now we're in the time where society is actually going through a kind of crisis. And we notice it more or less as individuals, but we can't help but, of course, noticing.
I think this crisis it's got so many layers. It's an abnormal event that affects everybody in some way. When you have the crisis or incident with Estonia ferry in the 90s or something, it's a severe event, but it affects quite a few people that's really targeted by it. But this one comes
it's global,
and affects us all. But still, that's a general level. But still, it's a lot of individuals that experience fear from themselves, fear of getting the disease, or fear, acute severe fear of losing jobs, and so both the general perspective and the individual.
Yeah, exactly. So I mean, the triggering factors for a crisis can be the threat of a loss of a job, or that you actually do lose your job, or broken relationships, but also a pandemic that affects the whole society. So that can be a triggering factor for us to feel fear and to feel uncertain, and things that change that you mightn't have been expecting, changes that puts new demands on you as a person, or on you as a team, or as a manager, or a human being in general, that it is a new situation to actually adapt to. And this can lead to a severe feeling of loss, or the loss of control, that you feel that you're not actually controlling what's going on. And we're going to get more into deep with that in a minute. But what we'd like to talk about is what distinguishes the corona crisis. Well, there's 4 areas that we've identified so far. And one of them applies to you, of course. Some of you, we know in your line of business, you work from home already. So that itself mightn't have been a big change for you, to work from home and to use digital tools and, to work remotely. But the whole social isolation situation is forced upon us during this time of crisis. So it makes a difference to us. We can't actually choose to go into the office, or we can't choose to meet our family members, or our elderly, or people we know who are in risk groups. So we have to be innovative and find other ways of meeting up. But it's a hindrance, of course, at first, before we get into the mental state of what we're actually going through. And then, of course, you mentioned it before, that you have concerns for your own health, and you might be worried about parents or people around you who might be at risk to.
We talked about that earlier in our work. We see that the crisis, in some sense, brings out the best and worst in individuals and also in teams. We see
Absolutely.
that on the upper side, the best, that it brings out innovation and finding new solutions. But on the other side, it's quite a lot of conflict, and we will get into that later on.
Yeah. And then, of course, like I mentioned before, this uncertainty that we mightn't know where this is going to end or when, it creates a feeling of lost control. And that can happen on an individual level. Some people are more affected than others. But of course, it has an impact on the workplace. And when we don't meet in our normal life, it's hard to keep track of each other and as colleagues. So we're going to get back to the importance of actually keeping in touch and to check in with each other every now and then. So we see this as a big challenge in the workplace. And also there's psychological influencing factors that affects you in your daily life, like the cognitive side, what we actually think about, our thoughts, affects us by maybe watching the news. So by watching the news, you see a lot what's going on, and there's a steady inflow of information, and you see the death tolls rising, for example, in Sweden, and that's it gets you thinking about things. And some people might feel a pressure in that, and it can increase the feeling of feeling uncertainty and the lack of control. And on the emotional side, you might feel that social vulnerability when you're working from home and you're being isolated.
And the problem is that the crisis itself, we need to find new solutions, new businesses to make the company survive. And we really need to be smart. And the stress that takes some of that ability out of us, that's what we're talking about today.
Exactly. And just to kind of demonstrate the whole power of thought, I just want to show you a big picture of lemons. So if you try to just think in your, just by looking at that picture, if you try to take a deep breath with your nose, and you try to smell the lemon, and you might even have one in your hand, and you squeeze it and you lift it up and you get a drop on your tongue of the lemon juice, something will start happening by just thinking about it. So you get a reaction just actually thinking and looking at a lemon. So this is the thing about humans. We can think into the future. We can participate what's going to happen. And we have memories of previous experiences that can get us to think about certain things.
Yeah. And that's a great ability, but also some comes with a cost. You
does.
will talk about it now in stress, but we can think about what's our first choice when this happens. Don't think about the lemon.
And then you think about it more.
Yeah, and don't think you're in a meeting, you're developing a game, you're in a critical meeting, and a lot of people supposed to not think about their worries. Think about John Cleese in 40 Towers when he's trying to don't mention the war scene.
The war? Who started it?
And then, of course, you will be totally hooked up with it. So.
Of course. So this stress is a good thing for us. We need it in order to survive. It's an instinct for us to react, and it's to do with our survival. So we need the stress reaction to get focused and to get away from the danger or to fight our way through a danger. So it's a natural response. But when it happens over time, like in the likes of a corona crisis, when we actually don't really see the end of it, we don't really know for how long it's going to affect us. There is a risk, of course, that we keep being stressed and pressured because we don't really know. And that makes us lose focus, and it makes us actually more stupid. So we kind of lose the ability to use our frontal lobes, which is where the logic is going on in our brains. So we kind of lose that ability, and it can make us aggressive. It can make us kind of take a step back, and it can make us unresponsive. So
I just have to ask you, where are you now in the corner? Will you be aggressive now?
I will be very aggressive in a minute.
But you're
I'm pretty focused, actually. Yeah, I think so. I'm pretty green. But I think as well, that's on an individual level. But this model here is actually from the Swedish Defence Force, and there's been research done on this, and also on a group level, Johan. So what do you think? How does this affect a workplace?
Yeah, of course, when you have 5, 10, 15, 50, 500 people in the red zone, things will happen. You people, like you said, they're a bit stupid, or not stupid, but action ready in a fight flight mode, and of course a lot of meetings and interaction. We have to see others' perspective to function, and the cost here is that conflicts, unnecessary conflicts, tend to rise a bit. We see that a lot. So.
And then especially if you don't meet physically, it's hard to read each other's signals. So the stress tend to maybe get a little bit different when you meet digitally. And you might sound a bit more, not aggressive maybe, but you sound a bit more annoyed and short and snappy instead of, being more considerate with your teammates that might be going through the same thing, because you don't read each other. You don't really see each other the same way.
Yeah.
So
and it's we of course we will talk about what to do then, but just checking in and address this
the phenomena
the
itself,
phenomena, it really helps
in a digital meeting.
And also when you see when things go a bit wrong, do this simple follow-up. I didn't mean to sound quite as harsh. So.
Exactly, yeah. So our reactions depend a lot on what we have in the past. What kind of experiences do we bring with us? In the army, you talk about train as you fight and fight as you train, which means that when you're in peacetime, you practice and you go through a lot of the hard bits before you actually are in the war situation, so that the behavior will be there when you're stressed, for that very reason, that when we're stressed, your high levels of stress can counteract learning. And when you're stressed, your automatic thinking kicks in. So if you have it automated, then the right behaviors, then it's easier for you to do the right things when you're actually stressed. So that's a lesson for everyone, to practice things when you're not stressed, to have the behaviors there when you're stressed.
We see a big difference. The high function teams, or just the okay function teams, they handle this crisis very good. I think it brings out the best in people, because they have routines, they have check-ins, check-outs, they have good relations.
Yeah, like a pilot who has a list kind of thing, a checklist.
But if you don't have that, if you're a bit on the bad side and this crisis hits you, it's not that you automatically team together.
No, you have to have something to build it upon, yeah. And also the root of the crisis. In this case, we can't really see where it came from. We couldn't affect it. But I mean, on a general note, a crisis affects us if we think that we had something to do with it. So there could be shame or guilt mixed into your feelings, and that can make you maybe react less to it. You might feel a bit of lack of action because you feel guilty, or you're worn down by the fact that you think you might have had something to do with it. And then, of course, in this situation, it could be choices that you make in your daily life, maybe as a manager, or in the workplace. Did I make the right choice here? Because you simply don't really know how to handle it now, and it's not your fault, but it can trigger things in you that you start doubting things, and that lack of action can maybe make you make irrational choices, making the wrong priorities, and sometimes you focus so intensely on getting into a solution and find problem solving, that you forget to involve people who need to or could be of help, trying to sort out the situation together with you. So that's again in the cone. You might be slightly down in the cone and less flexible.
Yeah, and a bit down in the cone. I think maybe we're not seeing lack of action, but random action, or learned action, or do as we normally do action. I think it is a known phenomenon when you're in a building and the fire alarm goes off, people tend to go out the same way they came in, even though they're standing just at fire exit. Exactly, but because when the stress hits you, you do like you normally do. So and that can make people act a bit weird sometimes.
Yeah, exactly. Irrational actions. And then research that's been done show that people who can handle highly stressed situations are usually individuals that normally would be fairly confident and have a good self-awareness, and who also can handle criticism, and they can weigh in information in a way that makes them make the right decision. Then there's no prestige in it, and they have an objective kind of view on things, and are fast at coming to a decision, so they find their step faster. So what can you do then, Johan, to increase these things?
Call Anna. No.
Exactly. Call a colleague. Well, I think one thing that we're pretty good at, and we help a lot of managers and people in general when we go out and do our job, is to help people put words on what's going on. And even if it's a smaller crisis, it mightn't have to be the corona, but anything that happens. I mean, companies go through smaller crises every now and then, whether it's a member of staff dying, or if it's something that happens, of a smaller scale. But to put words on the feelings, and to, find a context in the workplace where you can talk about these things and allow the time for it.
Exactly, but because I think many of you work from a distance, even though it's not a crisis. But if we think about an office, often we grab our coffee and we have the small chit chat. And I know that you haven't been able to sell your house, or you have the daily stress, and you talk about that, and then you go into a meeting. But now when we have the meetings, it tend to be so packed, so, and the short chit chat time where we also address these feelings can be quite
exactly. So you
important.
don't have the pre-information about your colleague, which makes, when you go into a meeting, if you've had a chat before, you have an understanding. Oh, I know why he's a bit down today. He just told me. And then you have more, patience with your colleagues. You don't really go through that when you work from a distance. You go straight into a meeting without that pre-information. So it makes us kind of, judge the other person in a different way. So that's why it's important to create forums for just normal chit chat during this prolonged crisis. How are people actually doing working from home? What does their daily routine look like? Do they keep a routine? We're going to get to that in a minute as well. And then to create, if you don't already have a network, a digital forums like digital fika, as we say in Swedish, well, then you might have to create one. And that can be a manager taking that initiative. It could also be a group member, just to, sit down and have a coffee together on the screen, and to catch up and maybe decide we won't talk about work for 5 minutes or 10 minutes. We're going to talk about how we're actually coping. And that can be, a relief, just to kind of put words on things. It mightn't be a problem, just daily chat. And it's easy to forget about that when you never meet in the office. So as for a lot of companies right now. So that's one thing. And then, Johan, we were talking about this yesterday, the whole thing about feeling in control and not feeling in control, and how important it is for resilience and to feel the ability that you can affect things.
Yeah, we tend to over consume information, and we're flooded with it, and I think we are kind of pushed in a direction where we focus on factors that we can't control, and it brings out some irrational behaviors. In the beginning of the crisis, people rushed off to find the toilet paper and so, but that's quite understandable, that when you're faced about all the big data and things, you try to reach for a roll of toilet paper.
Exactly, because it's the kind of things you think you can control, but then we ended up not having enough. So you can't control how much is in stock, and you can't actually control for how long this will last. We'll have to put our hopes to a vaccine and to further research. And we can't control how other people choose to react, or how they react. And we can't choose how others follow the restrictions and the rules of social distancing, for example. And we can't control why people behave in certain ways, or we can't actually see into the future. So if we put a lot of emphasis on trying to think about these things, then we're going to spill a lot of energy, because we can't actually do much about it.
Feels kind of heavy. Just
It feels
listening
very
to
heavy. So what can you do then?
Yeah.
You can actually, you can choose your attitude.
Yeah.
You can work on your own behaviors. You can work on what you choose to do, your actions. If you want to be kind, helpful, you
I
want
can choose to write this list, what I can and cannot control.
exactly. I can choose. So you can choose your actions.
Yeah.
I'm sure you have other examples.
Yeah, but I really like this model. I use it even when we're not in a crisis. The topic here is demands that comes to us in work settings also, and just make this distinction between what I can control and what I can control. It's helpful for me as an individual, but also when I try to reach out to others. It could be my colleague or a friend, and if I'm a manager, of course, I can see the other ones in this focus I can't control. I hear this talk and I try to guide the other one into the inner circle. So it's helpful in helping others as well.
Exactly. So in a way, you can affect how you choose to move forward and how you want to get out of this crisis as an individual. And then, of course, this applies as well on a group level. I mean, you can choose in your teams and in your work setting what you want to try to affect, and the smaller things that you actually have an impact on. So it's important to make the distinction and focus on the things you actually can influence. That will save you a lot of energy, and it will bring out more positivism in you, and hopefully get more motivation going.
And this simple exercise, you could do it in a group setting as well. We as a team, what can we control? And also in the project.
If you work on a project, exactly. We know, and we've heard about situations where production lines in Sweden are stopped because they couldn't get components from China. And, what can you do then when you're sitting there waiting? And it mightn't apply for you in the same way, but I'm sure you're global companies as well, some of you, and you're depending on people from other parts of the world. So things might have come to a halt anyway for you, or, slowed down your tempo. We also know that your business is going pretty okay at the moment, some of you anyway, and people are gaming more because they're at home. So
I think the outer circle here is kind of lemons hanging there.
Yeah, there's a lot of lemons.
Lemons, and the thing is, if you're in a team and just address them, what kind of lemons are dragging our attention, they will be less.
They'll be less sour.
Less sour.
Less sour.
Pretty good, yeah.
So just by addressing them, like we were saying before, put words on things. And then another really important thing for the resilience and ability is, of course, when your group is threatened by fragmentation and you mightn't be able to, be able to connect the same way physically. Now we know, as we said, we know that you're pretty used to it, but this is a forced situation, so you actually don't have the choice. It is important to stay in touch and to make sure that there are forums for it. And another thing is that when you might meet as well on a daily basis physically, or at least maybe a few times a week or monthly, the roles can be a little bit more diffuse, because you can always you can correct it when you're meeting up, and it's easier than when you actually sit down together with a project. But when you work remotely, the roles will have to be more clear. So you have to redefine the roles to make sure that everybody knows what's expected and what's the goal at the end of it. So that's a really important factor that we see a lot in our job, that kind of falls a little bit now when people are working from home who weren't really used to it, or that the roles might actually cause a bit of conflict.
Yeah, and also do that work again. That this role clarification.
Yeah,
you don't do that one time and it's done. You have to go back and
you have
do
to
it
go
again.
back and do it again. Yeah,
because of when the task change, maybe the roles has to change as well.
Exactly.
I think maybe if we stop a bit here and talk about, I think an important part of the social context in a team is goal and goal setting, because that's a good topic to chit chat about. What have we have achieved? And I think teams in general, crisis or not, often tend to set goals in far stretched. In 3 years we will have this game on the market. So we humans, we are like puppies. We need gratification immediately. So try to bring down the goals to weekly basis or maybe daily basis, and what have we achieved this week, and we talk about that, and then we have the fika.
And then it's also important to make the difference between what we've actually achieved, as in hard facts, and then as well how we actually cooperate together. That's another
what
one.
Have we learned?
What have we learned together? How did we do this together? Not just what we got out on the other side on the production line, but how did we actually do it to get there?
You put it well, because the result is there, but under that is learning goals.
The learning curve and the learning goals, exactly. So there's two different types of goals. I think we'll go to this one. And so what have we seen in the research that's been done with working remotely from in the corona crisis? Well, we've seen that the upside for a lot of people is that they find an increased work-life balance, that it's easier to get the time for exercise, and people mightn't have the long commute. So it saves time in a way, and we'll get to that in the next picture, but people actually find that they get more efficient, so they get more time for other things. And then the downside, of course, like we've just talked about, the lack of social interaction with colleagues is a big downside. And some people find the distractions in the home environment quite annoying. We were joking here before, talking about spouses running in the background, or kids crawling on the floor.
Kids, they learned how to crawl on the floor.
Johan's kids, they're almost teenagers now. They crawl on the floor so that they won't be
I have
in
to
the
say,
camera.
no camera on. They're just writing a report now, so you can
you can walk. So so some people find it a bit difficult to work from home from that sense. But there's been surveys done. You have to correct me now, Johan. It's in Seed Business School, and they've done a survey on people. They got to self-report what they thought about working from home connected to productivity, and 40% of the people who were answering this survey said they have actually improved their productivity. 37% thought it was no difference really, so they worked the same. And then only 23% thought it declined. And maybe it's the people with the crawling kids on the floor. And then when it comes to the support with work from home needs, a lot of people thought that they got a lot of support with the technology infrastructure. So 80% thought that was, pretty good. And but only 50% found that they got manager support. And 63% thought that the organizational procedures and processes were clear enough for them to know what to do. So obviously this is an area where there's work to be done, like we have addressed just now. The goal clarification, the roles, showing an interest, not just for the work, but to actually, do the social check-in and the social needs, and to be seen by your company, by your manager is important, as well as doing the job. So you might be productive, but you can't skip the other part. So you need to feel that your manager is there with you, and you need to feel that the organization is helping you structure-wise and helping you with clearing, processes that might have had to change during this crisis. So what do you think, Johan? What do you make of this?
I think I'm a bit surprised that so many actually thought that work improved.
I don't think people.
But also, I think from being a psychologist, I saw the challenge coming, fulfilling basic needs as a human, needs of social interaction. We have to mirroring each other. We have to feel competent and show that to others. Now it's a lot of sharing files and movies, and so we don't get this social interaction.
No, we don't get to talk
but also
about the...
it can be done quite well when we learn the technique and the system. We work a lot of with like public organizations. I don't think they are quite used to work on a distance and using videos, but the learning curve has been quite steep. So
I think our audience today has you know, they're ahead of the development because you're so used to a digital setting. So I think there's a lot of advances for you. Saying that, I'm sure that having to work on the social side and, you know, that side mightn't be as natural because, like we said, it's forced upon us. We don't actually have a choice to go into the office.
I also think some problems that existed before just surfaces when roles are not clear, when meeting the routine for meeting are poor. It surfaces quite fast when you have to meet on a distance. So
exactly. I mean, as consultants now, we do get a good few calls, more now than before, to help out with conflict. And we can see that it is a lot to do with the whole role clarification and things not being, you know, hung up on a functional structure when this happens. So it's a bit like a card house falling, house of cards. So we're going to talk about 5 characteristics that they're needed for enhanced teams and efficient teams. And this is a general fact, like this is before the corona, but they become so much more important now. And dependability is one of them, where team members, you have to feel that you can depend on your team members to get things done and to meet expectations. And the structure and clarity we were talking about as well, that high performing teams, they do have clear goals and they have a well-defined role in their team. And you have to feel some kind of meaning and meaningfulness connected to your job so that, you know, it has some kind of personal significance to you. And also that the job you're doing has some kind of impact on society or something that you value, and that the group believes it together. It's a group feeling. And we're going to get to the last one, Johan, that I know is one of your favorite topics.
That's kind of the ceiling of it all, because the psychological safety, it's really the buzzword now in organizations, because if we don't feel safe to take a risk and taking a risk that's saying I don't understand where we're going, or maybe I made a small mistake that we need to address together. If it's not safe to do that, it will have severe consequences. It will have consequences of how I actually feel, my social work environment, but also, of course, on result.
On the product itself. Of course, you might delay deadlines.
Yeah.
In the end of the day, if you don't talk about mistakes.
Putting things under the carpet, of course, it will surface someday. So
some stage.
I think psychological safety is, I said before, it brings out the best and the worst in people, and we see that some teams, they overachieve when they face pressure and crisis. They really step up. I think it's because of this.
They have a lot of trust. There's a lot of safety, feeling of not being ridiculed or, you know, ridiculed in the team. And
they are stressed. They are a bit down in the cone that showed earlier, but they still dare to take new steps, and they support each other when mistakes are made. And I'm also sure, I'm really going.
Yeah, you really like
that. But I'm sure if we asked you who listened today, describe the best team you ever been in, I'm sure you would describe a lot of psychological safety. And the last point is, it's very accessible. It's written a lot about it. It's if you Google it, you will find Google's work on psychological safety.
Yeah, it's a huge study.
Project Aristoteles, and so it's very accessible, the term. So.
Exactly. We work a lot with that when we go into teams and work with interventions. It's one of the first things we have to address and work on. We've been looking into remote working, and there's actually studies been done from previous years on global teams that applies now when people are going into remote teams due to the corona crisis. So there's 4 key things that you as a manager will have to think about. And of course, it's the team members will have to be aware of these things too, in order to accept what the manager is actually doing. Because it might change and it might be quite different from what you're used to when you meet in the office. So the first one there, Johan, what do you want to say about the one when you have to lead differently?
I think for all of the 4 bullets here, it's in a Swedish context. We on good reasons we like to
reach the decisions through
consensus and this distributed leadership that we now in a crisis, you have to make a clearer directions. You have to maybe offer fewer choices, point a little bit more, but still balance and build trust, and still have time for this social
interactions, and social support.
So be a little bit less Swedish in that
exactly.
sense.
So what we found when we looked at the research is that it kind of demands from a manager to have a broader skill set. So you have to, if you're not the social type, for example, you might have to practice that, because you can't skip that step in this remote working situation. And if you're one of those that wants a lot of input before you make a decision, you might have to step up your game a little bit and try to come to a decision quicker, and maybe pick a few influences for your decision making. And go with it and try. And then, of course, you can evaluate, did this work out well? Because the evaluation is key as well, to evaluate what you do and how you do things on a regular basis. And then to build trust as well is an important one, where you have to be visible in a way. We're going to get to the next slide as well, where we kind of point out what to do, but it's important as well to show that you are present. And just by saying, when you have meetings, instead of sitting down at your computer, where you might have a more stiff posture, and you might be a bit distant, you might be looking at your screen at the same time, you stand up and you walk around and you talk with your hands, and you try to keep eye contact, and you try to make it a bit more personal, as if they were in the room. So try to make it a bit more lively and that builds trust as well. They can see your intentions then. They can see the intensity in your ideas and when you present things. So this is a key factor as well for you as a manager.
And also what drives both trust and psychological safety is when managers actually admit when they are wrong and
talk
about mistakes. And of course, if you as a manager only talk about your own mistakes, maybe you're in the wrong position. But being able to talk about your mistakes and use a lot of questions, not too much questions to stress people, but set a standard that be curious. I think that
curiosity is key as well.
So I'm looking at time, but we're good.
We're good, yeah. So a little bit of the practical side of this then. We know it's kind of small, but to follow up employees individually, show your presence and that you're accessible, even if it's remotely, and try to make adaptations based on people's needs, and to find out what the needs actually are. And the social context, and to set goals is important.
And to narrow the goals down. It's always a good idea, but especially to stress people.
Exactly. And to accept that it is uncertain times. Talk about that as well. Like we actually don't know. Try to make small plans ahead anyway, and keep focus on what you can focus on. that'll help people to feel, meaningfulness in the short run and in the long run as well, of course. And then ask for feedback. What's needed? What do they think is functional during these times of crisis, and what needs to be changed? Ask for feedback. Don't be afraid to get input. And to look, if you're a manager, if you're in a leading position, and of course an employee as well, you need to look after yourself, your own needs, your own structure. It's easy maybe to forget about yourself because you want to be there for others. So it's easy to kind of, leave yourself out of the equation and just go ahead. But then in the long run, if this crisis goes on for a good bit, we don't know what's going to happen in the autumn, then you're completely, wrecked, tired, and you risk, of course, developing unhealthy patterns. So
we can't go on board airplanes now due to Corona, but when we do, we will be reminded, take the mask first and then help
exactly,
others,
and then help the others. Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, maybe we will jump to the end question, so we have time for the
this
Q&A.
one.
Yeah, I think so.
Yeah. I think we're getting to the end of this. We wanted to address a little bit, just quickly, the whole a little bit, Johan, here.
Sure.
We just wanted to kind of address, we wanted to connect with you as well, the fact that we can be stressed, and stress can make you a little bit less, your thoughts are less accessible. You mightn't be as creative in your mind because you're stressed. And creativity during a big change like this one can sometimes maybe be hard, but also we know that people do get creative during the time of crisis. We had a silly example there with Isaac Newton. He was said to have come up with his theory on the gravity model during the plague, when he was at home.
Not just the apple, also the isolation.
The isolation, yeah. So, I mean, things do happen during crisis and when people are isolated. But to think about ideas, when you come up with an idea, maybe you see new needs. That can be something. I mean, I've seen creative solutions on wine tasting sessions done digitally now. So, I mean, somebody came up with the idea that, we can, order the wine, distribute it, and then we do the wine tasting in a digital forum. So there's good ideas coming out of this too. It's creative. So maybe we see new needs and make a plan for those needs and what we need to do. What kind of knowledge do I need to go ahead with my idea? And who do I need, or who do we need as a team to go ahead with this? And then, of course, it's important to make a plan of action, to actually take that step and not just keep it as an idea, but actually roll with it. And we know that there's a lot of creative people out there, but you might also be affected by, the cone, the stress. So it's important to kind of, what can I affect? Maybe I actually do have good ideas if I just put my mind to it. And to share with your team then, if it's in a work situation. So we're curious now to see, and Eliana, I think you're there as well, what your challenges are and what are your opportunities in this. Feel free to ask questions. We have a few little topics there that might give you a few ideas, but we'd like to hear and get input from you as well.
Oh, thank you. Thank you so much, Anna and Johan. Thank you so much for the presentation. A lot of insights, I guess, a lot of information, a lot of content. So as Anna and Johan said, let's just jump into the Q&A session. Oh, Robin jumping with a question already. Okay, so I have a question for you. Do you think this pandemic will change how we use media entertainment and games in the future? And why? How?
Yeah, quick answer would be yes, I think so. I think a lot more people realize what they can get and how they can use media and games. And I see a difference in my kids, for example, and not just kids, but us as adults at home as well. We've changed our behaviors just over a couple of months. And that's anecdotic, but I think it goes for a lot of people. You see the possibilities with gaming and entertainment, and there's a need for it. And especially if people see this in the long run, then you want to maybe invest in it and get a better console. You know, you want to invest in it. You want to have that entertainment at home. What do you think?
I think the same. I also think that generations tend to meet in this form like they've never been before, and of course they use Zoom to meet their grandchildren to just chat, but also if you can't meet your grandchildren physically, maybe one day you actually visit them in the game and see and hang out and chat with them. I see I hear examples of that now, and that's quite new. I think I don't think we would have gone there if it is.
I've heard the same actually. Older people getting into playing with their grandkids through that. It's a way to connect with them. So I think I think there is definitely a great potential for that to increase in the future, and I think we're kind of speeding up the learning curve by going through this crisis as a society. There's a big need,
and also the line between gaming for fun and for learning education. I think that what schools have been going through now is
exactly.
extraordinary, and so
e-sport as well. I met a bunch of kids actually at the weekend. They were doing a lot of e-sports because they couldn't go to football. There was a match and it was they were doing e-sports on the.
So they were playing FIFA online instead. Yeah. And that's great. I mean, I was going to mention that it's true. I mean, there's a lot of the reason why we got a bigger influx as well, and the reason why some game studios are actually doing better and during this crisis is because, of course, a lot of people perhaps that were not even playing games start playing games as a way to socialize, and of course, people who already played might have more time now or want to invest more to play because it's a way to hang out. Like I always played games, of course, but now we have weekly sessions just to join games that I didn't used to play a lot before because it's not just my preferable genre, but now it's a great opportunity just to hang out with friends since you can't hang out outside, so you hang out in a game instead.
No, I think it's a great opportunity for that. So yeah, I'm playing Plants vs Zombies at home now. I never thought I'd do that.
Yeah. Well, thanks. We got some other questions here, so I'm just going to bring to you. So it's a question from Dave here on our Zoom. Any specific advice for people working alone, like one person, the studio, particularly in terms of psychological safety? It's hard not being able to mirror much on others and evaluate risks, like when you are alone.
If there's other forums where you can join people in similar situations, that could be an idea to maybe join up with other solo flyers to see if there's anybody out there through forums where you could meet up digitally, maybe meet up outside as well, to get yourself a context to get away from the loneliness then. So I mean, I'd say there is definitely a market for that, or you know, there's a lot of people who work on their own, so to try to hook up with people like that.
And it's a bit of a risk working alone. I mean, I come to see Anna today. I go up in the morning, and so. But if you work alone, you tend to turn the day to night, and vice versa. So maybe you get involved in activities that are not directly related to work, but help you set the day and week
routine.
Routine. I'm talking like I was someone's grandmother now, but I think it's quite important to see how work in a group also regulates eating and sleeping and everything around it. So actually,
absolutely.
Yeah, I think it's what you mentioned on your presentation. Like, it's very important to have these healthy routines. And I think regardless of this time of crisis, when you work by yourself at home, it's always a challenge because, of course, as you once said, you can just overlap, you lose track of what day you are, the time. maybe then you work overnight, and then you start to distance yourself from
Yeah.
actually the
Yeah.
social society routine, and then it's
Yeah.
really easy to dive in there and then
Yeah.
go to a
You could
burnout.
find the professional network, of course, to hook up, but I think you just finding
A friend or somebody.
or club or anything.
Yeah, and try to
No,
keep the normal routines, I would say as well. Like maybe
yeah.
if you're working even before the crisis, like you would work at home, but you still maybe the weekend would go out, hang out with friends. And now if you can't do that, but then as we talked before, maybe you hang out online. You can still
Yeah,
have these
absolutely.
virtual ficas or like after work beer with friends. We try to do that at Game Habitat and at DevHub Discord. We try to do some after work, so we can just
Yeah.
grab a beer online via Discord
And
on
I'm thinking as
Fridays.
well, Liana, through your network, you have that community, you have a network of people connected to you. There might be more people in the same situation, so you could maybe get in touch through you to to create those kind of forums.
Definitely.
Where you could, because
have a
you share,
breakfast room and
breakfast room, and you do something like that.
Yeah.
I was going to say as well, I know I coach managers, and there's a lot of managers working from home on their own at the moment. And well, I got an example of lunch walks, that there was a routine between a few people. They didn't work together normally, but because they were all working from home, they realized that we're all at home, we live in the same city, and we're sitting on our own. We should arrange lunch walks. So they have a little chat group where they send out a little message, and then they walk with the 2 meters in between, and they meet up in a park somewhere, and they go for a walk, and they might sit down for a takeaway if it's good weather and stuff. And she said, and the managers I've been talking to, and this woman in particular, it gives you great satisfaction for the rest of the day, just having met someone like that, even if it's outside for a walk. I think that's something to do as well, to, build with what you think a little bit outside the box. Who do you know who might also be sitting on your own?
That's true. Yeah, I keep in touch. That's true. Like when you go for a walk, maybe just hang out for like Messenger or WhatsApp or whatever, like Discord or Zoom. Just put your headphones and then you just go walking but talking to a friend, to a person. So you still feel that there's someone with you, and they also walking. So you're sharing that, and then that's actually great. Yeah, I used to do that already before the crisis. I was just going to work. I used to talk to my friends from Brazil back in my home. So that's the way that I used to communicate with them, just walking back and forth from work. It's the time reserved for my friend. So I have another question here. It's from Matilda. She's saying, what you would do after the crisis, how to go back to normal in the best way. How do you communicate with your colleagues that have now realized that they prefer working from home, and prevent that from negatively affecting the team culture?
I think what we always should do, but especially if we're leaving the crisis and building up something that's back to normal, we should spend time talking about what have we learned, what problems have we solved together. Try to backtrack, evaluate, and do that without the demands that we have to achieve something. Just learning from something. It's give you a sense of control, that even that we didn't wish this to happen, but we choose to invest time and take the opportunity to learn something. I think that's very important, and I think that's a responsibility for managers to make that happen.
I think I think evaluating it, and to actually write down a list, what was functional and what was less functional, and what can we bring on into the future even without the corona, and maybe not set black and white rules for it. You can evaluate those things as well. I mean, if people prefer to work from home, maybe you should give them the chance to do it even after the corona, and evaluate how it works out, and come up with structures for how to keep in touch when some people might be working from home. And then of course you have your forums where you have to be in the office when there's no risk of being contagious or whatever. And you might be able to be a little bit more flexible in the future. That's what I'm hoping for. I hope that will be the way to go ahead, to actually see. I mean, we saw the figures here. Some people actually perform a lot better working from home. So I mean, it would be in any employer's best interest to maybe, take care of that side of it, and maybe actually encourage it as well when it's possible. And then there's a balance there of not losing out on the social context, of course. So I think to bring those good bits ahead, definitely.
And try to reduce risk of conflicts that we said earlier. Try to investigate if is relationship damage in some sense.
What could be the risks of doing it? And evaluate that together.
Yeah, I think this your answer is actually very in tune with, for instance, what Sarah wrote in the chat for us as well. She's also from one of the local game studios, and she mentioned exactly the same, that it will be the basic, they will need to adapt as a company, and then perhaps not perhaps lead people working from home, perhaps not 100%, not every day, but partially from home, partially from the studio. And I think this is a great
I mean,
idea.
it adds value to people to get a better work-life balance. And if that's the output from this crisis, that we see that people get more, balance in their work life, then I think it's a good thing. Then we should really evaluate that one.
Yeah, totally. Yeah, I think a lot of game studios are actually going that direction already. Like right now already, there's just, of course, reduced task force, but they already, since they had to go through the infrastructure to prepare for this, to work remote, then, I mean, you see their work. So why not keep like that as a possibility for those who prefer a flex situation? Of course, it's probably, there are some challenges to work 100% at home, because then it's going to be, like David said, how to keep sane. But the flex situation. I can see you sharing the screen of what you can do for us. So if companies have, if they want to communicate with you guys, if they want to maybe help with a specific challenging at the workplace, or solve a specific internal conflict, so you can basically do some tailor-made courses.
Absolutely.
Like you can offer some specific help.
We do, and we do arrange a lot of courses and tailor-made for different companies' needs, and we always have a good sit down with the management and to see what's needed and what the company's needs would be. And then, like we said before, this time of crisis and a bit of pressure on top of that, it creates more conflict. So we've been in doing a lot of that. So we could be, I mean, it doesn't have to be a huge thing to happen for you wanting the help. It could be advice, just talking to us, and you'll solve the problem yourself. So it doesn't have to be huge things that we do, but I mean, pieces of advice and somebody to bounce it with, who's a neutral part. And also, of course, we have the knowledge on this area, in this area. So we're ready to consult with anyone who has issues or questions.
You don't need a problem to call us. We also work, of course, with how to improve motivations and well-being in companies. So
it doesn't have to be a problem. I mean, it can be that you want to enhance good things that are happening. And
which is the ideal. Ideally, you want to reach you before the problem arises.
Exactly.
Right?
It could be like a preventative kind of thing, or to enhance things that are already working quite well.
We train managers and teams in advance. Yes.
Yeah, exactly. And there's also a lot of train the trainers. We train the managers to be able to handle things on their own when they occur. So.
That's great. Well, thank you so much. Thanks so much, Anna and Johan. Thank you for the presentation. Thank you for being here with us this morning, sharing the insights and giving advice for people who are listening to us. So yes, as they said, that's the contact information. Feel free to contact them if you have follow-up questions, or if you want some help, or if you want to just work with them in your company. But yes, I think now we are 7 minutes past. I just once again want to thank you everyone for tuning in and to listen to us. And then we'll see you around. We'll see you in the next event.
Again.
Thank you so much.
Okay, bye-bye.
Bye-bye.